Okay, today I have the chance to get to talk to somebody whose work I've actually been around for a long time, and I just didn't know it until recently. His name's Dan Goldstein, and he's the main guy behind Cherry Audio, who has got a really interesting product out right now called Voltage Modular. We're going to talk a lot about this, but we're going to have Dan talk about it. So, with that, I'll say hello to Dan. Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Hi, Darwin. Everything's going great.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to have a chat. You have got to be a busy guy because I've been watching your work lately, and it seems like you are in high production mode.
Yeah, I have to say, it took a while to get here. The product that we have that's out now, this voltage modular, it's something I dreamed up in 2004. And I've been sitting on this idea for a long time. I've been rolling it around in my head. I actually built a prototype of it back in 2004. It wasn't, I was just never happy with it. It was missing something, and it took me a while to figure out what that something was. And then once the idea really came together, I put a team together and we started building it, and we haven't stopped. And it's just been a whirlwind. I have to say, in my career, I've built a lot of things that I'm proud of, but this voltage modular is really the best thing I've built, the thing I'm most proud of. It's the thing that went from idea to reality without any compromises, without what happens in a typical project where you say, well, we're going to cut this feature, and this will take too long, and we won't make enough money if we do this. We didn't do any of that. We just built the product the way we felt it should be built. And the end result, I think, is something really spectacular.
So you mentioned that there was like a tipping point where all of a sudden things went right for you. Can you share what that was?
Sure, yeah. So in 2004, I had this idea of a software modular that you could expand any way you wanted to. You could add all kinds of modules to it. You could configure them, lay them out in different cabinets, move them around. At the time, there were modular products out there, but there was nothing that quite worked the way hardware did that was flexible. So there were certain products, like there were software that looked just like a classic Moog modular, and it worked just like a classic Moog modular, but it was fixed. That was the only thing you had, was a Moog
Configuration,
modular.
right?
And yeah, exactly. And I had, and I still have, a large synthesizers.com modular system. And I love the ability to sort of add to it and change it around. And I thought someone should do that in software. So I did it. But like I said, there was something that I wasn't happy about. And it took me a while to kind of figure out what that was. Years later, I was watching the documentary I Dream of Wires. Have you seen that?
Oh, I sure have, yes.
Yeah, I got the 4-hour version. I contributed to the
Yeah, so
Kickstarter
did I.
campaign. And
So did I. That's like the obsessive compulsive version. It's great.
yeah, exactly. And I made my wife sit down and watch 4 hours of this. And something kind of dawned on me. And what I noticed was when people build these Eurorack systems, you can go to Google and you can just Google pictures of people's Eurorack systems. And you'll notice a really interesting trend. And that is that nobody builds a system that is just all modules from one manufacturer. They go out and they buy modules from dozens of manufacturers. They buy oscillators that they like from a certain manufacturer, and they buy filters they like from a different manufacturer, and they buy a sequencer from somebody else. And they put it together into a system that is both incredibly unique and very much their own. I mean, they made this. It's something only really guitar players can do, right? Certain guitar players will buy a guitar and then they'll take out the pickups and they'll put in different pickups, and they'll take out the pots and they'll put in different pots and maybe replace the neck or the tuners, and then they'll have a guitar that's kind of theirs. And as keyboard players, we don't do that. You buy a mini Moog and you have a mini Moog. You buy a Juno 60 and it's a Juno 60, and maybe you mod it, maybe you put blue lights on it, blue LEDs, or maybe you add another jack that does something. But generally speaking, the product you have is what the manufacturer made. But when it comes to these Eurorack modular systems, people build their own instrument. They design it and they build it, and they're proud of it because it's theirs. It dawned on me watching that documentary that if I made a software modular, it would only sound like the things that I think should be in a modular synthesizer. It would only have those ideas and those modules that I use and that make sense to me. But having it be an open platform that anyone can develop modules for, and if all the modules can have their own style and their own look and every control is skinnable and customizable, then people can build modules that all have a different sound and a different personality. And users can create modular systems that are unique and that are their own. And when that switch went off in my head, I said, now I get it. Now I get what this was missing. And I understand how to build this product. I tossed it around in my head for a little while longer. And like I said, finally put a team together and built it. And the end result is we have lots of third-party manufacturers that are building modules. At the Synthplex show, we met new developers that want to get involved and are already starting to build modules. And I just see this as so much more than just another plug-in instrument. It's, I don't even like to refer to it as just a synthesizer. It's really a platform. It can do anything. It can do effects. It can do music. It can do sound effects. It can play samples. It can do anything that someone building a module decides they want it to do. And I think that's pretty cool.
Sure. Well, now, there are, in fact, a fair number of modular systems out there. Some of them are abstract, like Max or Reactor. Some of them are very modular-like, say, the Soft 2 Modular or VCV Rack. What is it that makes Voltage Modular unique?
You're right. There are lots of ways to do modular synthesis. I mean, going back to the Nord modular keyboard.
Yeah, right.
But a lot of those, to me, they don't emulate the experience of sitting in front of my modular equipment and patching sounds together. I mean, all these platforms are great. There's no question about it. Over the years, I've built a fairly large modular system that consists of a lot of synthesizers.com parts, a Roland System 100M with a couple cabinets, and actually a vintage Moog modular P2 two-cabinet portable system from 1969. And all this stuff is great because it all speaks the same language. It's all 1 volt per octave. You can patch the Roland into the Moog. You can patch the .com sequencer into the Roland. And they're all interchangeable. And there really is something fun about grabbing a patch cable and plugging stuff into a module and turning some knobs and making sound, creating sound and shaping sound. In the land of software, there's 1,000 ways to do almost anything. But I wanted to replicate that experience of working with real hardware as closely as possible. There are definitely some things in Voltage that make it even easier than working with hardware. For example, every single jack in every module in Voltage Modular is actually 6 jacks. So you can plug up to 6 cables into any jack. And if you click on a jack, it'll sort of expand to show you the 6 jacks. You can do that in hardware, but you need multiples or you need banana cables that you can stack together. We've just tried to make that process as easy as possible. But for the people that are really into modular hardware, what Voltage Modular does is replicate that experience. And again, any way you do it is great. I mean, there's so many different ways to make great music with software. Sure. But as a hardware guy, it's funny. I mean, I do so much programming in Voltage with sound. Even though I have this giant modular next to me, it's actually faster to work with the software. I pull it up, I create patches all the time. It's fun and it's so fast, which is why I'm so proud of it.
Yeah, well, and in comparison to a big synthesizers.com rig, it's also a lot easier to put in your backpack and take with you to the coffee shop, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And one of the things I like to show at something like Synthplex is, if I want to make a patch with 30 modules, with 30 oscillators in it,
right,
I just click, 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 click 30 times, and I have 30 oscillators. I can't do that with my .com. I mean, Voltage Modular it costs less than the price of pretty much one single hardware module.
Right.
So it's very accessible. And yeah, you'd throw it on your laptop, you'd take it on the plane, you'd take it on the bus. At the show at Synthplex, I talk to people that own hardware modulars like I do, but they take Voltage on their laptop, and when they're on the plane, they make patches, they program things. It's also a great way to test ideas. If you have a patch you want to build and you want to know what it sounds like, you can pull up the software and patch it and see if it works before you go to hardware. And then the other thing, and this is something I'm not sure everybody really gets, but Voltage Modular works really great with hardware. So we have all kinds of audio inputs and audio outputs and MIDI inputs and MIDI outputs. And your Voltage LFOs and envelope generators and oscillators, they can be sent out, the audio outputs, and they can interact with your hardware. And you can, if you have the right kind of audio interface that'll pass DC voltages, you can actually use control voltage DC to, you can use the sequencer to control your hardware. At Synthplex, we had a Mark of the Unicorn audio interface, and those interfaces will pass DC out to their output. So we were controlling a Roland System 500 modular with the virtual sequencer in Voltage Modular, and we were sending LFOs out to control the filter, and it works great. I mean, there's essentially no latency. It's super fast. So I think it has a place in almost anybody's studio.
Yeah, I want to come back to this, but before we go there, one of the kind of stock things I do in my podcast is I talk to people about how they got to be the maker, developer, artist that they are. And in your case, actually at Synthplex, I learned a little bit from some old co-workers of yours. I learned a little bit about your history, but I would like to, even before work, I would like to go back. How did you get started in both? Because you're clearly a good software developer, because you've done this project, and I know you've worked on some amazing projects in the past. But also, you clearly have a love and a passion for music and for synthesizers. And I'm curious, where did both of those things come from, and how did you find a way to mesh them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess it started in the early days of home computers. When I was, the story, the way it goes is my parents brought home a Texas Instruments home computer, the TI-99 4A. They brought it home back in 1980, I don't know, 4 or something like that, 82. And I was fascinated by this. I was just a child at the time, and I thought this thing was amazing. And I said, I want to learn how to use it. My parents said, well, you can, but you have to learn how to read first. And I said, okay. And not too long after that, my parents were called into my school, and they didn't know why. And they showed up, and the teacher, the principal, wanted to talk to them. And they had no idea what I'd done. And the principal called them in, and they said, well, we want to know what's changed with your son. And they said, what do you mean? What's he done? And they said, well, nothing. His grades have just improved so much. And we want to know what you've done. Did you enroll him in some kind of class after school? And they said, no, we bought this computer. Well, it turned out I wanted to use this thing so bad. I just started doing my homework and working hard to learn all this stuff. Like a lot of kids in the 80s, the computers didn't do much, but it was so fascinating to be able to sit and use them and program them. And I love that. I love being able to just write some lines of code, and the computer would do what I told it to do. So that went on for a while. Like a lot of kids, I wrote video games and that sort of thing. And then when I got to high school, my best friend and I, he's a singer, a vocalist, and a guitarist, and we started writing songs together, and I got my first MIDI keyboard. And that keyboard was amazing. The keyboard itself was terrible, but it had MIDI, and I could plug it into my computer, and the computer could talk to it, and I could control it. And this was a whole world that opened up, a new thing I could do with my computer that I couldn't do before. So from that point on, I mean, I had a copy of Cakewalk for DOS, and I could write sequences, and I got an Sonic synthesizer, a VFX SD synthesizer, my first pro synthesizer, and I could sequence drum lines and background parts, and then my friend and I could go out and perform. And I just thought it was fantastic. And I decided I wanted to be a part of this. You know, someday I was going to make this kind of software. That's what I wanted to do. I went to college at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I got a degree in computer science, and I set out to be a professional programmer. Yeah, and that was my dream. That was sort of what got me started.
Very interesting. Well, it's crazy because so many of those little nuggets you dropped sound like my history. Although I'm curious, what is that first MIDI keyboard that you had?
It was a Yamaha PSS 480.
Oh, wow.
It was it had little keys. It was a micro key. It was basically an FM preset keyboard.
Uh-huh.
There wasn't a lot you could do with it. I believe, I'm trying to remember, I think my parents got it at Sam's Club.
All right.
Something like that.
Okay.
I mean, this was not a fancy keyboard, but again, it had MIDI, and it was that little MIDI jack. I had a Sound Blaster sound card on my computer, and you could get a MIDI interface that plugged into the joystick adapter on the back of the computer.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, the way I remember it is I plugged in that MIDI interface, and it just opened up a world to me. I mean, it was just incredible to be able to control this keyboard with the computer.
So now one of the things is that at the time, there was not very much information about how to develop software for computers. I mean, it's funny you mentioned Cakewalk for DOS, because like for me, one of the things I loved about that was it had a little built-in programming language called Cal, the Cakewalk application language, where you could write these like little obscure programs. But I wrote all kinds of stuff that would, like, you know, take some basic MIDI stuff and explode it into drum tracks and do all kinds of weird stuff. It was a lot of fun. But in terms of just like developing on the level of creating commercial software, there wasn't a lot of information out there. How did you crack into that? How did you go from having a computer science degree and a love of MIDI to actually developing music software?
Yeah, I got to tell you, it was not easy back then. There were not a whole lot of resources, and a lot of it for me was a bit of luck. I read everything I could. I mean, I got back issues of Keyboard Magazine, and I read everything I could about MIDI and about digital audio and that sort of thing. I had a very, very early copy of SoundForge by Sonic Foundry. And when I graduated from college, I went to work for a multinational bank doing computer networking for them. And this wasn't really what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was I wanted to make music software. But I had no idea how to get started in that field. And what happened was I had this plan. I had this idea that I was going to get 5 years of experience as a professional computer programmer, and then I would start knocking on doors, you know, saying, hey, I'm an experienced programmer. Maybe I could have a job. And one day I was at my house. I was reading the manual for SoundForge, and there was a reference in the manual. It was kind of an obscure reference, but it was a reference to the city of Madison, Wisconsin, which I thought was so strange because 6 months earlier I had graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I had just moved back from Wisconsin back to Chicago, and I was working at the bank. And I saw this reference in the manual, and I thought, that is so strange. Why would, of all the cities in the world, why would they mention Madison, Wisconsin?
Right.
So the next day I went to work. I went to my office, and I pulled up the web browser, probably Netscape Navigator or something like that. And I found their web page, and I was blown away to discover that this little software company was in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where I had just lived. I'd gone there for college all that time. I was so shocked by this that I just, on the spot, I just emailed them. I sent them a copy of my resume. I never expected to hear from them. In fact, I so much did not expect to hear from them that the phone number I gave them was my office phone at my job, which I mean, who would do that? But I
Right,
never thought they'd call.
right.
And then the next day, the light was blinking on my phone. I had a message, and it was from Sonic Foundry, and they wanted to interview me. So what I've learned since, what I've really come to appreciate, is that there are a lot of people who know about music technology, and there are a lot of people who program computers, but there are really not a lot of people who know about music technology and who program computers.
Hmm.
It is a narrow field, and part of it is what you said. There just isn't a whole lot of information out there. Even today, you can't really
Right.
go to college and learn sound programming at most typical programming courses. So when they called me up, they basically said, the guy who I spoke with said he had a stack of resumes on his desk, but I was the only one that actually had experience working with MIDI and digital audio. And in college, I took classes like video production and,
Hmm.
anything I could that would sort of get close to the things I wanted to learn. And so anyway, I got my start. And then once I was immersed in that company, there were just so many opportunities to learn everything. It was such a cool company. It was full of young people, like really, really talented young people. And we were writing some amazing software. And I learned so much more than I ever imagined I could learn. And that was really the stroke of luck that sort of led to the rest of my career writing digital audio and MIDI software.
That sounds amazing. Now, um, were you there throughout then the period, both their success and when they went public, but also as they kind of cratered at the end?
Yes, and
Mm.
that was a very short period of time. So when I started in mid 1997, I was employee number 54 at the company.
Okay.
And within about 2 years, there were over 450 employees.
Oh my God.
So the company just exploded. It was a small, fun little company when I started, but when the dot-com boom of 1999 or so started, even though Sonic Foundry did not, they weren't a dot-com in any conventional sense, one of the big buzzwords of the time was MP3, and investors were throwing money at any company that had anything to do with MP3. And
I
at
see.
Sonic Foundry, we made, audio editing
Audio
software
editors,
that
right?
sort of had,
Yeah, right.
yeah, exactly. And so the stock just shot through the roof, and there was tons of money coming in, and they just grew and grew and grew. We could talk all day about what a mistake that was in retrospect, but in a short amount of time, all the dot-com stocks crashed, and the money they just stopped flowing, like so many other companies that got swept up in the whole stock explosion. All of a sudden, they had 450 employees and not nearly enough income, and they were
To
losing
support
millions
it.
and millions of
Right.
dollars. And then one day, we just all got laid off.
Yeah.
It was, at the time, it was a pretty dark moment. I mean, I never saw it coming. We were having so much fun. But in retrospect, over the years in particular, it was really a great thing for me personally, because once I got out into the rest of the world, I was an experienced programmer. I'd written some pretty cool applications at Sonic Foundry, and there were a lot of really interesting doors that opened. And, I've really had a career I'm quite proud of since then.
Yeah, well, you, as part of Sonic Foundry, I mean, you were involved in software, all of which is, or much of which is still available, all of which still kind of carries this DNA of being amazing stuff. I mean, uh, SoundForge remains one of the best audio editors that's out there. Um, Acid was so groundbreaking, it literally spawned new forms of music. Vegas was as strong of a multi-track editor, and then the addition of video on top of that, long before people were like clued into native NLE editors. I mean, all this stuff was like so groundbreaking. It's amazing that you would have been inside the lab while all that was coming together.
Actually, you just proved how knowledgeable you are, because almost nobody knows that Vegas started out as an audio editing program. The very first version of Vegas was not a video program.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
know.
today
Right.
it was Sony Vegas, and now it's Magic's Vegas,
Yeah.
and it's a pretty well-known video editing program. But it actually began life as an audio editor,
Right. Right.
and a pretty good one. I mean, it was great at the time. We were taking ideas from Acid. Acid was all about manipulating loops, and we were giving that treatment to digital audio. So you
Yeah.
could record tracks, you could edit them, you could crossfade them. It was really, really cool. And then someone made the decision to start adding video features to it, which was also a great decision. But the problem was that the audio features lagged.
Right.
People
Right.
stopped working on the audio features. And that was right at the time when plug-in effects and plug-in virtual instruments were showing up. And there was a lot of stuff that should have been put into Vegas but never got put in.
Right.
And the big reason why is all the stock money came in, and
Yeah.
they started taking on projects that they thought would
They
be
were
more
focused on
lucrative.
that, right? Well, it's funny though because there certainly were things in Vegas in the audio editing. I remember the first time that I like did a kind of a bump edit, where you take the front of one audio track and then like lay it over the back of of another audio track, and it just like interactively would make a nice crossfade right in front of you. This is like it was years before any other software did that. And it was just phenomenal to me the level of innovation that you guys were bringing to audio software. It was outrageous.
It's so funny you mentioned that. So for the last 15 years, I've been the CEO of Acoustica and the lead developer of our Mixcraft recording software.
Okay.
And Mixcraft has won all kinds of awards, and it's, again, it's something I'm very proud of. But one of the very, very, very first features that went into Mixcraft back in 2004, when we first started developing the first version of Mixcraft, was that auto crossfading feature. I always loved that feature. I thought that was the best feature in Vegas. You can take two
I did
clips,
too. Right.
lay them on top of each other, and they will just automatically crossfade from one to the other. And Mixcraft still does that to this day. I honestly, Mixcraft to me, I mean, I've been living with Mixcraft for a long time, and it has developed into a really powerful product. But we've managed to keep the interface very simple. It does so much, but it's so much more approachable than a lot of other recording programs. And so much of what's in there is what I always wanted Vegas to be, but what it never really became. So I thought, hey, here's a great opportunity to build the software that we wanted to build back at Sonic Foundry and just never got the chance to build. So yeah, I mean, there's really, that's the thing about engineers and designers and programmers. People think that we invent things, that we just come up with ideas that didn't exist before. But everything we do is inspired by other developers, other programmers, other software we've used.
Mm-hmm.
The best designers will take the things they like that's out there and take the things they don't like and figure out how to improve them, and then come up with their own take on any given idea. And if sometimes what we build is good and sometimes what we build isn't good, but it's always built on top of the things that have come before.
Sure.
So yeah, a lot of that spirit of Sonic Foundry, of what we were doing back in the 90s, has really sort of continued to this day. And then, of course, I made so many friends. There's so many great friendships that came out of Sonic Foundry. There are musicians that I still hire to this day to build loops and sound effects and samples for Mixcraft. I mean, it's like a family. I've always been so proud of the people I worked with back then that have gone on to continue in this industry and to thrive.
Well, it was
really
it was really an incubator for a lot of amazing people to do work. Now, did you move directly from Sonic Foundry to Mixcraft, and did Mixcraft or Acoustica, did they exist already, or did you help found the company?
So I had a detour in between. I moved out to Las Vegas, where I live today, and I worked for a company called Hello Network. You've never heard of it. They're long gone, but it was a very, very innovative company at that moment in time. Because if you remember back in the days of streaming media, before YouTube and everything that we sort of take for granted today, remember when you had to install Real Player or QuickTime
Oh, yeah.
onto your computer in order to watch a video or listen to music on the internet? We had one of the first technologies that let you stream music and video without installing any program on your computer.
Oh,
so there was a Java applet that it was very small and very fast, and it would just sort of run on a web page and stream media. And it was pretty cool. When I found them, the quality of the audio was quite poor, and they knew it.
Yeah.
And here I was, I know all about digital audio. So I came out to Vegas, and I very quickly made great improvements to the audio quality. And we ended up having a very, very nice bit of technology for the time. They never quite knew how to market it. Marketing is always the toughest thing. People never imagine that. They always think you just build something cool and people will buy it. But back when Sonic Foundry came out with Acid, they had this amazing program. I mean, it was the first program that let you take loops and mix them onto tracks and create songs out of loops, and it would automatically tempo sync, all that stuff we take for granted today. And they had no idea how to sell this software to people. Mm-hmm. So they would run magazine ads in Keyboard Magazine and that sort of thing that said, Acid music software, you got to try it. But they had no idea how to explain this to people. And it was amazing because you could show someone, you could sit them down and you could say, look, here's a loop. I put it on the track. I paint it with a paintbrush. I want some drums here and here and here, and we'll add some bass and guitar, and I can speed it up and I can change the key. And in 2 minutes, people would go, wow, I totally get it. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. But they had no idea how to say that in an ad. So it took a while. It took a while for that product to get traction before word of mouth essentially spread. Remember, you couldn't go to YouTube and watch a video of it back then. Right. So it did take a while. And, to this day, marketing is the biggest challenge. In fact, it's even worse now because the magazines don't exist. And it can be really, really hard. And, of course, there's so many products out there and people have short attention spans. So it's tricky to get people to know about a cool product. And that's why we go to shows like Synthplex and NAMM, and we do our best to promote the product. And, like I say, I'm so proud of Voltage, and I really hope people will look into it and try it out, because there's some really impressively cool technology in that software that I'm very, very proud of.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it a little bit, because I've had a chance to play with it for a while now. In preparing for this discussion, I spent some more time with it, and you have got some really innovative stuff going on. I mean, first of all, you're kind of the integration of the kind of availability of stuff from your downloadable site. I mean, it's really cool how accessible all that stuff is, and especially with the search function, finding things when there's, when you start with over 100 modules, finding things can be a little hard. But you've got that pretty well tuned, I think. But what really blew me away, there was a couple of things. First of all, your implementation of polyphony was surprising and pretty wonderful. And let's start with that. You talk about wanting to bring some of the hardware feel to this software, but polyphony is something that people are just starting to struggle with a little bit with hardware modulars. What made you decide to take that leap?
Well, there's actually 3 different ways to do polyphony in Voltage Modular, depending on what you want to do. The simplest way of doing it, the way that is the most like hardware, is to use a MIDI to CV module. Basically, something like a Roland MPU 101 or whatever it is, where MIDI goes in and 4 channels of CV and gate come out. And you can do that. We have modules for that in Voltage. So you can have 4 oscillators, and each of them get controlled by a different CV signal. That's the traditional hardware way of doing it.
Right.
Another way of doing it is we have modules, like we have one called the poly-octave oscillator, which is sort of an integrated, basically almost like an organ module, and it just takes a MIDI input. So in Voltage Modular, you can drag a MIDI cable from your MIDI input and hook it up to a module that takes MIDI, and then that module itself can be polyphonic. And again, that's very true to the way hardware works today. But really, the leap that we took is we said, if people were building polyphonic modules, if there were hardware modules that were truly polyphonic, how would you connect them together? And the way you would have to do it is you'd have to do it with a ribbon cable, a wire that was actually many wires bundled together. So if you had a module that was 8-voice polyphonic, it would have to have 8 outputs on a single cable. And so we created a new kind of cable in Voltage Modular, which we call a poly cable. And that cable is really anywhere from 1 to 16 voices. You can set, in Voltage Modular, you can set how many voices you want globally. And then developers can build polyphonic modules that are connected with poly cables. There's nothing special to build a poly cable. You just click on a poly jack and draw a wire, and it's just a poly cable. But poly jacks have to connect, poly outputs connect to poly inputs. And then there are modules that will mix the poly signals together into a mono output, or take a mono input and send it out
and
to a
spread
poly
it out,
cable
right?
to multiple outputs.
Yeah,
and so we figured it's still true to the hardware paradigm. I don't really think there are companies building polyphonic modules like that today. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just a matter of time, because polyphony really is sort of the one thing that you can't really quite do in hardware modular synthesizers well. But there's no reason you couldn't. There's no reason they couldn't make a poly cable. So I think it's still true to the paradigm that we're going towards. But the end result is it's really easy to build big polyphonic patches, and you can do really cool things. Like you can have multiple polyphonic oscillators that feed polyphonic filters that then get mixed into mono signals that get run through delay and reverbs and EQ and on to phasers and chorus effects and things like that. So you can make big polyphonic synths, or you can make paraphonic instruments that have polyphonic oscillators, but only a single filter and a single envelope generator. I mean, it just gives you a lot of flexibility to recreate actual instruments that have been done before. The thing about paraphonic instruments is they're next to impossible to do right with most synthesizers that are out there. Because if a synthesizer is polyphonic, it's going to almost always have polyphonic filters and polyphonic envelope generators. But the classic string synths, like the ARP, Selena string ensemble, things like that, only had one envelope generator and one, global filter. And you can do that. You can do that in Voltage. You can build almost anything you can imagine in Voltage. But really, what you mentioned about the way our server works and the way you find modules, one thing I will say, we have had a whole lot of experience in workflow. I've been building Mixcraft for over 15 years, and it has won award after award after award for its ease of use.
Right.
When you build software that is designed to be very powerful but very approachable, you learn a thing or two about how to make software easy. And we took a lot of those lessons about workflow and put them into Voltage Modular. So, for example, there are no modes. You don't switch between editing mode and playing mode. Everything is active all the time. If you want to pick up and move a module, you just pick it up and move it. If you want to draw cables, you draw cables. If you want to turn knobs, you turn knobs. It's immediate.
And it's playing the whole time.
Works.
Right.
Yes, always the whole time. Again, that immediacy is what you get with hardware.
Right.
So to add these extra layers of, I have to go into edit mode and then I have to figure out what I want to move and where I want to put it. It doesn't work that way. You just pick up a module, you move it anywhere you want. The other modules will move out of the way. They'll make space. You can have as many cabinets as you want. You can drag multiple modules at a time. You can save cabinets. Every single module you can save presets for. So if you have a specific reverb setting that you like, you just right-click on it and save that as a preset. And anytime you load your reverb module, you can have all the presets you want. We've done all these little things to try and make the software experience even better than the hardware experience, because, we're emulating hardware, but you're sitting at a computer and you can do so much with it.
Take advantage of that, right? Yeah.
If you have a touch screen, we support touch screens. You can turn multiple knobs and sliders with your touch screen and move modules around and all kinds of stuff. So, we're trying to make the best of all possible worlds with this. And, again, you asked about the polyphony. That's sort of what it is. People want to do polyphonic instruments, but they want to do it in a modular environment. And hey, you're at a computer, why not have a polyphonic cable? There's no reason not to.
It gives you the opportunity to experiment in a really different way. Another place where I saw that is you have a module that actually exposes MPE, the multi-channel, multi-control interface for advanced controllers. It seemed like a really great opportunity for people to experiment with MPE a little bit. Is that something that you personally were fascinated with, the MPE interface?
Oh yeah, I love those instruments. I was just playing a fantastic controller at Synthplex. Whenever I play an instrument like that, I always feel the same way I feel when I play a theremin. If I just worked at it, maybe I could master this thing, because it's not immediate. You look at this keyboard that's not a keyboard. It's just made of fabric, and you put your fingers down and you start sliding from note to note, and you can sort of make music with it, but it's a skill. It's an art. Mm-hmm. I think there is tremendous room for some incredible music to be made with these controllers, and they're getting more and more affordable. It absolutely made sense to have an MPE module in Voltage Modular. And by the way, it works great. I mean, because it's a modular synth, and because you're dealing with a polyphonic expressive controller, you can move your fingers up and down. And you can have it open a filter, but you can also have it add more reverb or delay, or add ring modulation, or, you can patch this stuff any way you want to.
All the stuff that modular makes possible, right?
Yes, exactly. If you love programming synthesizers the way I do, then it's really, really neat to have all these different inputs. You have pressure, you push down harder on the fabric, and that becomes another control voltage that you can use to control things. And I got to say, we have gotten some amazing sounds out of Voltage Modular using an MPE controller. I really think that's sort of the wave of the future, and I think we're going to keep seeing some pretty amazing controllers that are just going to get more and more affordable. I mean, look, one thing you learn at a show like Synthplex and NAMM, and when you've been in this industry for a while, people are passionate about synthesizers. I don't know if they can tell you exactly why. I mean, they'll tell you that they love just controlling the sounds, and they love the different tones and timbres that you can get out of an instrument. But there really is something pretty cool about being able to dream up a sound in your head and then turn some knobs and push some buttons and have that sound come out. I really do feel like with a good instrument, you're sort of connected to it. And the ability to add expression when you want that note to get louder, or when you want it to get brighter, or when you want it to get distorted and more complex, the ability to reach out and grab a control and make that happen, that's a big part of what makes an instrument great.
Sure.
And with these kinds of polyphonic controllers, you can do all of that at once just by moving your fingers without ever stopping playing the notes. And you can bend the notes and you can warp the notes. And I just think we're living in a golden age right now for this kind of technology. It's amazing.
So what's next up for Cherry Audio? I mean, you have got just right under 2 million modules from what I can tell. I couldn't even count, because once you start taking into account all of the third-party people that are using your developer kit to develop modules and stuff, there's like countless number of modules available. So it seems like, coming out with the next module maybe isn't the most exciting thing. Maybe it is, because you have something exciting up your sleeve. But what's kind of next? What's up next for you?
Yeah, that is a great question. We passed a milestone recently. There are more third-party modules available for Voltage Modular now than there are modules from Cherry Audio that we've made. And it took a year and a half to build all these modules that we've made. And it took less than 6 months for the third parties to equal and surpass what we've done.
Right.
And that's what I love about a platform like this. If we go back to the beginning when I said, that spark that I had, that idea that I had after watching that I Dream of Wires documentary, when third parties can be a part of a platform, it can go in so many directions that the original developers never imagined. If you think of all the iPhone apps or Android apps that are out there that no one ever imagined would be built when they created these operating systems, that's what I want for Voltage Modular. But as far as Cherry Audio goes, we don't want to be a one-product company. We have, at this point, created a lot of cool DSP. There's a lot of cool technology in Voltage Modular. The module designer, I could talk for days about that tool. One of the things that is so unique about Voltage Modular is this programming tool, which most of our users never see. But it is so easy to build modules. I mean, it's a drag and drop environment where you just drag in knobs and jacks and sliders and buttons and write a few lines of code. All the programming is in Java, so it's really easy programming. And it's just really, really fast to build modules. And that's one of the coolest things about this product, and most people never even see it, but the developers absolutely love it. And it's one of the things that makes the system so expandable. So we have all this technology. The problem, if you want to call it a problem, the problem with our technology right now is that it's really only in the hands of people that understand or want to understand modular synthesis. While that is a lot of people, modular synthesis can be pretty daunting for people. So there's a lot of people that maybe aren't ready for it. And then there's all kinds of musicians that are not synthesizer players, people that produce beats and play guitar and things like that. So we are thinking of ways, we have some ideas for products that we can build that leverage a lot of the cool technology that we've built, but that open it up to different kinds of musicians. Without going into too much detail, what I can tell you is I think it's 2019. People have been building plug-in instruments and effects for a long time. There's a lot of great stuff out there. And I think at this point, the future is not just another instrument or just another effect. The future, I think, is these kinds of open platforms that are so expandable and that are limitless in so many ways. And that's what we want to build at Cherry Audio. We want to build products that other programmers can participate in and that can grow and grow and grow and change over time. So we're tossing around ideas. I have one idea that I'm particularly excited about. It's just a matter of finding the time. There's never enough time. So many ideas and never enough time. But yeah, you're going to see some more cool stuff from us. We're by no means stopping with Voltage.
All right. Well, Dan, it was fantastic to hear about this and to hear about, really frankly, to hear about your excitement about the work you're doing. I mean, it's always great to hear when a developer who's put in as much time as they have on a product still be like super excited about the thing that they've done. That is always a really good sign about what a product's going to be like. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and for having a chat with us.
Well, thank you, Darwin. Thanks for having me on your podcast, and thanks to everyone out there for listening to me ramble about my life for a little while. The thing is, I mean, a lot of people have jobs, and a lot of people have jobs that they like. But I had this dream, this thing I wanted to do, and I've been able to do it
Yeah.
for 20 years, for longer than 20 years now. And yeah, I wake up every day and I think I just have the greatest life. I get to play with synthesizers for a living. I get to make sound and recording software, and it's a dream come true. I can't stress enough. We live in this time that is so amazing, because what you can do with your laptop in terms of recording music and producing music and creating sounds and experimenting with audio, it's the stuff I couldn't imagine we could do when I was a young musician and I was playing coffee houses with my friends in college. I just couldn't even imagine that this stuff would be available, but I knew that it was coming. I could sense that when the very first computer recording software came out, I could sense that this was going to change everything.
Right.
So to have been a part of it, of all the advances that have come and all the things that I believe are going to continue to come, we just couldn't ask for a better time to be alive and to be living through this. It really is fantastic.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you. And with that, I am going to let you have the rest of your day. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Darwin.
All right. Bye. Well, many thanks to Dan. That was such a great chat. It's so cool to hear about his excitement and his interest in continuing the work that he's doing and making all of this voltage modular stuff as great as can be. If you're interested, you're going to want to take a look at the Cherry Audio site. That's cherryaudio.com. They're running kind of a introductory offer right now, which might be interesting to you. But in any case, take a look at what they're offering and see if it's going to meet your needs. I want to thank you, the listeners, for continuing to stick with me throughout this. I mean, we're starting to look at what podcast number 300 looks like. I was going to say that I was not going to be doing a release next week because I was going to be at the expo, but I just had a great conversation today with someone from a label that I'm really interested to get out. So I'm going to put that together. That'll be out next week. But if you happen to be in Western Massachusetts, please swing by North Adams. Give me a shout via email. That's ddg@cycling74.com or darwin.gross@gmail.com. Nothing else, we can go have a coffee or something and have a chat. But I'd love to hear from you. If you're going to be at the conference, make sure you look me up. Let me know that you listen. In the meantime, thank you for listening. I will catch you next week. Have a good one. Bye.